Welcome back. As we've said, Senator Kamala Harris is having a breakout moment after last night's debate and her emotional exchange with Vice President Joe Biden. She stood out last night on the stage. Now she has the chance to build momentum off the stage. Can she do it? Joining me now, California Congresswoman Barbara Lee. She is California co-chair of the Harris campaign. Congresswoman, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
Let me start with, obviously, you're very happy with how Senator Harris did. What's next? If step one was introducing, showing that she's not afraid of ducking any fight, what's next?
Well, Chuck, she absolutely showed that she's the toughest candidate that can beat Donald Trump, and that she can prosecute this Trump agenda. So she demonstrated that last night, I think, very, very clearly. And what Senator Harris has done and will continue to do is travel the country, help people get organized. She's in the process of unifying the country, building coalitions, and really putting forth her vision and her agenda for the country. And she's listening to people. I have been in South Carolina a couple of times with her, and I want you to know, people in rural and urban communities are rallying around her. They're getting to know her, and she's mounting a grassroots campaign, and that's what's going to win this election, is going to be the power of the people and the mobilization and the organization of a campaign that's going to take her on to victory.
So Vice President Biden has complained mildly that he believes Senator Harris mischaracterized his record. What say you, Congresswoman?
Well, I tell you one thing. I watched the debate with three of my colleagues, two of whom are from swing states. And actually, they are undecided, and they decided that after watching Senator Harris last night, they want to meet with her and talk to her further. And I think that what she did was very appropriate. She actually told the truth, and it's about time that we confront many of these issues. And when she turned to Vice President Biden and she confronted him on working with segregationists on an anti-busing agenda, that was the right thing to do, because you know what, it wasn't only about her personal experiences, but it was about the experiences of millions and millions of Americans. And let me just say, Chuck, finally, I listened to what Vice President said today, and no one is denying his record on civil rights. But it's about time for him to say, look, I was wrong. You know, this is 2019, and then looking back, that was wrong. And I know it hurt a lot of people. But he hasn't said that yet, and I'm very disappointed that that has not happened.
If he were to call you, and he's somebody that might do that, right? He might hear this right now, or hear that you're upset because he's known you a long time. What would you say to him?
I would say, Mr. Vice President, it's time that you say to the American people and to people who have been in many ways marginalized through government policies, of segregation, racist policies, say that, yes, you know, like he said, he unfortunately worked with segregationists, which, if you ask me, that was wrong, and that he also worked on an anti-busing agenda, which he thought was right, and then say, look, I recognize that was wrong, and that it hurt many people, and I would say, Mr. Vice President, please say that. Please say you recognize the pain that this brought and the pain that your work really perpetuated, and say, now in 2019, I recognize this, and, you know, we have to look at new ways to address racial justice, but then, you know, that's what I did, and that was not the right thing to do. And yes, I did this, and let's move on. But he hasn't said that, and he should say that.
Okay. Let me ask a little bit more about Senator Harris's campaign platform and one of her promises. As she said, and it's been basically among her first signature plans, this middle-class tax cut. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Sure. And, you know, these huge tax cuts by the Trump administration really has hurt working men and women and the middle class. And she said last night that her first action, of course, is going to give low and middle income working families a tax break. But also she's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts, and that is extremely important. Also, when you look at her agenda, she talks about working men and women, families who wake up in the middle of the night worrying about what they're going to do tomorrow to pay the bills. First, we talked about, and she's talked about, giving teachers up to a $13,000 raise. Teachers are securing our future. They deserve a raise, and she's going to do that on day one. Also, she talked about our dreamers and DACAs and DACA children and immigration reform, and how she's going to move forward to make sure that everyone has access to affordable, accessible health care. Yes, Medicare for all. So she has her agenda that's going to affect the lives of every American, and I'm very proud of her putting it out there because it's a bold agenda. But I tell you, Chuck, it's based on a vision, and it's based on moral clarity of where this nation needs to go on behalf of the people.
Very quickly, you're known to a lot as sort of a leading dove, if you will. You're a big skeptic when it comes to military intervention, and you're very much sometimes on the leading edge of this. Have you had a good conversation with Senator Harris about your views on this, and how close is she to you when it comes to these issues of military interventions?
We haven't talked in depth about the issues which I have been working on for many, many years. We've talked in generalities, but I can tell you I'm confident that she would support repeal, as we passed in the Defense Appropriations Bill a couple of weeks ago, repeal of the 2001 authorization to use force, which, if you remember, Chuck, I voted against, and I was the only one in 2001 after the horrific attacks. I'm convinced, and her vote today shows that she supports the administration coming to Congress if they're going to consider any military action toward Iran. And I know that she respects the Constitution and the three branches of government, and I'm confident that she understands and knows that the president has to come to Congress if, in fact, he's going to contemplate using military force.
Congressman Barbara Lee, Democrat from Oakland, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And sharing
nice
your
being
views
with you,
and
Chuck.
sharing Senator Harris's views. Thank you. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.